Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hope everyone doing well. Hare Krishna. Nice. Good. I always like the thumbs up. So yesterday's reading, this chapter is a little heavy in one sense because I think these two rest of the things will be similar to that. You know, Prabhupada is 1975. Am I right? And 1977, November 14, Prabhupada leaves this planet. So how crucial for Prabhupada is to establish such an important organization for the mankind. So I can see that how he's really guiding the disciples so they can sustain and for future and fixing, correcting things and a lot of things. Only Prabhupada could understand, you know, or maybe few devotees can understand the gravity of this situation, right? Any other things anyone wants to share before we go?
Prabhupada was asking GBC to take more involvement and basically to solve issues instead of everything coming to Prabhupada.
Yeah.
And if they were not able to, if GBC is not able to solve it, they have to come to the manual meeting and resolve it there. And whatever resolution they make, they have to follow for 1 year and they can revisit again.
Yes. And sooner or later they have to do it anyway, right? Prabhupada's priority to finish his books. He is still not done. Actually, he could do only up to 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Still was pending, you know. Hridayananda Swami Maharaj actually worked on the 11th and 12th canto. And the accident happened yesterday only, right? We read about the accident yesterday.
I think that was day before yesterday in Mauritius.
Day before yesterday, okay. Anything else?
The discussions about sannyasi and grihastha, like
yeah, how the grihasthas will be sannyasi's responsibility, brahmachari's responsibility. I think this somehow got messed up here. There's a conversation, right? Yeah. Kirochara and Hirachara, diamond thief or cucumber thief. And I really don't, did we do up to here? Right? Probably. I remember the asterisk.
We did, yeah. We read the Chaitanya quotes for sure.
Yeah, right. Okay. So let me continue. While sitting relaxed in his room, Srila Prabhupada had his temporary secretary, Dayananda, read him some recent mail. One letter was from a temple president having difficulty managing the devotees. And Prabhupada had Dayananda summarize the letter's points. He said Dayananda, that the devotees aren't behaving. And so he is criticizing, but they are not accepting. Simply criticism is not our means, said Prabhupada. Our means is to show by example. Dayananda made a note of it to use in typing Prabhupada's reply. Now, Srila Prabhupada, Dayananda continued, he's inquiring about his household life. This is not the business of the Guru, said Prabhupada, how to increase sex life and family life. They are not happy, these Western men and women. They become married, but they are not happy. Therefore, I recommend brahmacharya and sannyas life. Acha, that's why. And now it is very rare now, you know, brahmacharya life is very rare. Several other devotees were also in the room with Prabhupada, and Jagat Guru, a brahmachari, spoke up because they have no training. That's why they have no They have so many problems. Whatever it may be, said Prabhupada, but they are not happy. Therefore, I recommend brahmacharya and sannyas. Srila Prabhupada had already been disturbed by what he saw as a loose husband-wife situation in Vrindavan. Now, hearing this letter from a householder who was improperly inquiring about his family life, he again turned his attention to Vrindavan and asked to see his GBC up for Vrindavan, Gopal Krishna, who had recently arrived in Mayapur. It is not a free hotel for lovemaking, Prabhupada began, even before Gopal Krishna entered the room. Vrindavan is not a joking place. There must be serious for Krishna. And I shall give them everything. Don't worry about money, but manage. There's no scarcity of money. There's scarcity of management. Why so many children in the temple? It is not simply a place for husbandless human. Children should always be engaged, so they shouldn't create disturbance all over. Srila Prabhupada said that if the mothers were irresponsible and only wanted to take care of their own children, then they should be sent away from the Vrindavan. Two women could run a nursery and take care of many children, and the other woman could work, not go to the roof or lovemaking. And Prabhupada said Prabhupada, and make a plan and go away. He stressed that since all India came to Vrindavan, ISKCON centers should be ideal in every respect. Otherwise, people would think that his disciples are hippies and no one would come. A good example of responsible care for children was in Mayapur, where a Gurukula has already been organized. Now, Prabhupada is continuing, and a letter comes, and Dayananda Prabhu reads. He's asking, that devotees are not listening. If I criticize, they're not accepting. They said that just criticism will not work. We have to show by example. Now, Srila Prabhupada inquired about the household life. He's inquiring about his household life. So Prabhupada said, what household life? And I'm already seeing this. They are getting married, but they are not going alone. Because he says that because they are getting married, because they don't have a training. Without training, everyone is getting married. So, to stay together, also this training is needed. I can see in Vrindavan this situation has happened. So I recommend that brahmacharya and sannyas. Now I understand why ISKCON promoted brahmacharya and sannyas life. Because disciples were not staying alone, not able to commit their marriage life because they don't have a training. Okay, what I may Prabhupada said that they are not happy, so he's recommended the brahmacharya and sannyas life. Now, he's referring to the example of in Vrindavan, loose husband-wife relationship, and also at the same time, so many mothers and children are there, but they don't have engagement. And he didn't like it. Is not a free place, hotel for lovemaking. Not engaged properly. So children should be engaged. The mother should be engaged. If they don't want, they can stay far from their place. They don't have to stay there. And because so many people will come to Vrindavan, and Vrindavan should be the ideal place where people can learn, see. Human can have a nursery, and children can be taken care. Others can work, but everyone should have engagement. Mayapur is a standard. Mayapur is doing well because they established the Gurukul, and Vrindavan should follow this same setup. Okay, AJ. Please go ahead.
Sure. Children are welcome, said Prabhupada, but make them jewels, not spoiled children, Varna Sankara hippies. For the sannyasis in Mayapur, Prabhupada's heavy words about irresponsible grihastha life fueled their own arguments. A few of them felt that grihasthas should not even live in the temples. That evening, when the sannyasis gathered in Prabhupada's room, they discussed with him the position of families and children in ISKCON. One sannyasi reported not being allowed to preach in certain temples because he was against marriage and favored brahmachari life. Others complained that expensive properties were being purchased to be used mostly as residences. The preaching was suffering, they said, and the brahmacharis were being told to get married if they felt sexually agitated. Prabhupada felt the heavy force of the sannyasis' protest, and he could perceive the antagonism between the ashrams. These things must be decided by the GBC, he said, and no one could go against their decisions. But he also expressed sympathy for what the sannyasis were saying. Families, he suggested, could serve in farm communities and live self-sufficiently in Krishna consciousness. Our whole preaching program is detachment from material life, said Prabhupada, to stop sex life altogether. Grihastha is a concession for those who cannot give it up immediately. Otherwise, marriage is not required. It is simply burdensome. Legal or illegal, the after effects of sex simply mean difficulty. March 7th, the GBC members assembled. The process was to make an agenda, discuss each issue, and then pass resolutions by voting. At the end of the day, they would go to Srila Prabhupada in his room and read the day's resolutions for his approval or amendment. The first day they spent mostly in assigning zones and duties for each GBC member. They reported these results to Srila Prabhupada and he approved them. Prabhupada also addressed the issue of grihastha and sannyas life, saying that all the devotees should become attached to Krishna family, not to the stool family or a pig family. Sannyas life meant rejection of the false family, but not the family of Krishna consciousness. The Krishna consciousness society was based upon renunciation, said Prabhupada, and therefore all sincere devotees were as good as sannyasis. The actual dress didn't matter, whether white or saffron, although the ideal grihastha should eventually come to the stage of a formal sannyas. He said that all his disciples should become gurus and each make thousands of disciples, just as he had, thus spreading Krishna consciousness everywhere. Grihastha men traditionally wear white, brahmacharis and sannyasis wear saffron. Discuss in the GBC, he said, and make a decision, question and put to vote. But if you make brahmachari party, grihastha party, sannyas party, it will be finished. Everything should be done very openly. We have to work for Krishna. Why this whispering is not very good. So it seems a little conflict in terms of, some of the sannyasis came to Prabhupada and said that, he said that a lot of the grihastha, the sannyasis didn't believe that the grihasthas should live in the temples. And they were trying to figure out what the position of families and children are in ISKCON. And then one of the sannyasis spoke up and said, well, since I'm not married and I'm against marriage, I'm not allowed to preach in certain temples because I've chosen this brahmachari life. And then others were saying, we're buying these expensive properties, but people are just using them as residences. And people were telling the brahmacharis just, hey, go get married. You're right. If you're agitated and if you're sexually agitated, go get married. So, Prabhupada was kind of understanding, what the sannyasis were saying. And he was worried about, dissension between the different ashrams. But he said he didn't want to make a decision himself. He said this is stuff that needs to be decided by the GBC. And if they decide, whatever they decide, nobody can go against. He also felt, he said families should be living in the farm communities, I guess not in the temples, but living in the farm communities where they can live self-sufficiently. And he goes further and says, our whole philosophy is detachment and get rid of sex life, and grihastha is not, shouldn't be an end state. It's got transitional period for those who can't give all those things up, give them up immediately. So they, sorry, I lost my spot. Yeah, he said otherwise, he says, in fact, he says marriage is burdensome. So, and he says it just causes more trouble, more difficulty in the long run. So then in March, the GBC assembled, and they, their process was they come up with an agenda, they talk about the items on the agenda, and then they pass a resolution and go to Prabhupada for his, I guess, final sign off for any amendments to the proposals. So the first day, it was just kind of bookkeeping. It looks like housekeeping type stuff, assigning different zones for the GBC members and what they should be doing. And then they got into, or Prabhupada then kind of informed them of this issue about, Grahasta and Chand, the issue that the sannyasis had brought to him. And he was saying, he's like, you shouldn't be attached to your, to your family. You should be attached to the Krishna family, like everybody. And he said sannyas life means rejection of that, but not of the Krishna family. And he says this is all about renunciation, and every sincere devotee is as good as sannyas, and it doesn't matter if you're wearing white or saffron. But the idea is, like I was saying before, it's grahasta should be a transitional period to get you to the point of sannyas when you can. And then he encouraged them. He said, everybody should become a guru. Everybody should make thousands of disciples and continue to spread, Krishna consciousness as Prabhupada had done himself. So he said, you know what, you guys talk about it, come up with a decision, put it to a vote. But he says, he's like, look, but if we draw these lines between grahastas and brahmacharis and sannyas, it's done, right? Like, if you'll create all these sub factions, and it'll just, cause splintering in Krishna consciousness, right? So he said, and just make sure you do it very openly, so everybody can see what you're doing, and it's not some secretive process. No whispering. Do everything out in the open, so everybody's informed.
Yeah, there was a feeling looks like someone is superior than the other, sannyas or brahmachari and grahastha. But we can see the situation. Prabhupada primarily was very stressing much on brahmachari and sannyas, because those days most of them were Western devotees, right? And the marriages were not very successful. So he said, let's focus on the brahmachari and sannyasi. It's good to learn. I also want to welcome Mother Mitravinda. She's a very good friend from Philadelphia. I'm glad she joined. Mother Mitravinda, can you please read? Hare Krishna, you think you can read? Or you want to listen? Please.
Please accept my baseball goes to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna, thank you.
Nice to see you.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
I will give a brief. Those who do not know Mother Mitravinda, of course, she has a nice family background and everything. Her father is she was in army, military, right? Your father is military. Am I right? Yeah.
He had a degree in science, but he earned it while he was in the military and traveled the world. Yes.
And Mitravinda Mataji is disciple of His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj, and she lived in Gita Nagar for several years, and we know her for many years in Philadelphia. And I'm glad she joined. I requested if she can join, so that's good. So can you please read? Basically, we kind of read approximately 6-7 minutes. 6 minutes, then we summarize also. Here you're starting.
Thank you. And where am I starting? Where the blue marker is?
Yes.
Thank you. Discuss in the GBC, he said, and make a decision. Question and put to vote. But if you make brahmachari party, grahasta party, sannyasi party, it will be finished. Everything should be done very openly. We have to work for Krishna. Why this whispering? It is not very good. The next morning, while Srila Prabhupada was on his walk around the Mayapur fields, the GBC chairman, Madhavisha Swami, asked for guidance in preparation for the GBC meeting that day. Madhavisha, the subjects that we are going to be discussing today in the GBC meeting are about the role of sannyasi and brahmacharis and grahastas in ISKCON. In the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, in one of your purports, you say that a sannyasi should never discourage a young man from getting married. But on the other hand, we understand that a sannyasi should encourage young men to remain brahmachari. So it seems to me like there's some kind of contradiction. Prabhupada said, according to time and circumstance, just like Krishna says, Nityam kuru karam tvam, always be engaged in your prescribed work. And at last he says, Sarva dharmam parityaya mam ekam saram vraja. So now you just adjust. That is not a contradiction. It is just suitable to the time and circumstance. Give up all prescribed duty, dharma, surrender unto me. Bhagavad Gita 1866. Madhuvisha then says, but is there some conclusion? Srila Prabhupada replied, the real aim is that you have to become the eternal servant of Krishna. Either you go through karma or jnana or yoga. It doesn't matter. The ultimate aim is how to reach Krishna. Arjuna achieved the favor of Krishna by fighting and killing. Hare Krishna. Prabhupada said no more. He had created the GBC to deal with just such problems, and he had instructed his GBC men personally in letters and in his books. Now they would have to apply those instructions according to time and place. Shall I continue?
Yes, this more paragraph. Just can you finish that?
Okay. The GBC met, discussed all day, and by evening had a list of resolutions pertaining to the divisions of ashram in ISKCON. Husbandless women with children could not live in ISKCON temples. Husband and wife could not live in ISKCON temples, even if separately. Before entering marriage, devotees should have a means of supporting themselves and not expect to live off ISKCON. Upon getting married, a householder would be financially responsible for his wife until such time as he took sannyas. Yes, darling.
Would you like to give a little summary? Would you like to give some summary, Mitravinda Mataji? Okay, I will.
Yes, thank you. Yes, no, I will give some. I'm sorry,
Okay,
I was talking to my son.
I will just give a little background there. This is 1975. Prabhupada is really working on giving up the responsibility to the GBC man, and still there's a not very clear cut idea of devotees what they should expect. There's a feeling of brahmachari, sannyasi, grahastha, and all this thing. And Prabhupada was giving example in the back that because in Western world, husband and wife is not trained very well, they are not able to continue their life as a grahastha. So in the previous verses, I think you were there. So he was saying that it's for now, it's better to focus on the brahmachari and sannyasi. So that's where and GBC is discussing now. So you're continuing this part. Yeah, please.
Yes. So what I'm understanding from Srila Prabhupada's conversation is, it's the culmination of what we read and we get in the Shastras. There are rules to get us to a particular place, and once we get there, our understanding should be that Krishna is the controller. Krishna is the doer. We are not the controller. We are not the doers. So anything and everything that happens, whether it's perceived as good or bad, is up to Krishna to have occur. Even though there's karma involved with each of us individually, even before birth, what happens is in direct relationship to Krishna's will. So in regard to the grihastas, the sannyasis, the brahmacharis, no bickering, no fighting. It's just that whatever happens, we should see the necessary, do the necessary, and apply Krishna consciousness to everything as it is. In marriage, I totally appreciate the system established Vedically, where women are taken care of and children are taken care of, and in the right time and order, things happen in the flow of what should. The preaching continues, the children are taken care of, women are taken care of, but it is through the training. For example, the recommendation of Brahmacharya Ashram is there for the safety and protection of society, in the sense that when men are trained properly, when they choose to go into the Grihastha ashram, they have already been trained to do so from a perspective of care, protection, love, commitment, and ultimately serving Krishna, because the wife, the husband, the children, everything is owned by Krishna, not by any one man. So with that perspective in mind, and attained through proper education of being a brahmachari, or just being able to study Shastra and Krishna's words, is such a boon in this age of Kali Yuga. Indeed, there are so few devotees in the world. Devotees or people practicing Krishna consciousness are very, very rare. And my realization is that, as Srila Prabhupada said, just applying Krishna consciousness to our lives, no matter what happens, is Krishna consciousness. Time, place, circumstance, but even beyond that, with our mind set on the words of Krishna and what the teachings are, there's no wrong.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Madam Mitrinda. That's why these devotees are getting confused. You see that in the 18th chapter, you are saying, he's a grahastha, he's a brahmachari, he's a sannyasi, and all these things. Now you're saying only brahmachari and sannyasi. So Prabhupada says, it's time, place, circumstances. How much did I think she read up to this probably, right? Okay. Vijayanand Prabhu, please. Is he there, Vijayanand Prabhu? Sorry, I didn't
Yes,
see.
Prabhu, I'm ready. Sorry, Hare Krishna. Prabhupada, the real aim is that you become an eternal servant of Krishna. Either you go karma, jnana or yoga, it doesn't matter. The ultimate aim is how to reach Krishna. Arjuna achieved the favor of Krishna by fighting and killing. Hare Krishna. Prabhupada said no more. He had created the GBC to deal with such problems, and he had instructed his GBC men personally in letters and in his books. Now they would have to apply those instructions according to time and place. The GBC met, discussed all day, and by evening had a list of resolutions pertaining to the divisions of ashrama in ISKCON. Husbandless women with children could not live in ISKCON temples. Husband and wife could not live in ISKCON temples, even if separately. Before entering marriage, devotees should have a means of supporting themselves and not to expect to live off ISKCON. Upon getting married, a householder would be financially responsible for his wife until such time as he took sannyasa. Reading the resolutions to Prabhupada in his room usually evoked little verbal response from him. His practice was generally to nod in approval or occasionally to comment. But when he heard the resolution that husbandless women with children could not stay in the temples, he uttered a thoughtful Then he said, "As for me, my only concern is that they shall not waste their valuable human life." He was speaking not in the tone of the official head of the society who could veto resolutions, but in a very personal, humble way, as a pure devotee. After so much struggle, he said, "They have not got this human form, and I do not want that they should miss the opportunity. As for me, I cannot discriminate men, women, child, rich, who are educated or foolish, let them all come and let them take Krishna consciousness so that they will not waste their human life. Although the GBC members usually had plenty to say, after these remarks from Prabhupada, they remained silent. Finally, Tamala Krishna Goswami, the elected GBC chairman for the year, spoke. Yes, Srila Prabhupada, he said, so we will strike that resolution. Prabhupada also disapproved the resolution that a householder would have to give financial support for his wife for the rest of his life until he took sannyasa. You each be guru, he said. As I have 5,000 disciples or 10,000, so you have 10,000 each. In this way, create branches and branches of the Chaitanya tree. But you have to be spiritually strong. This means chanting your rounds and following the 4 rules. It is not an artificial show. It is a material thing. It is not a material thing. Chant and follow the 4 rules and pray to Krishna in helplessness. We have to have enthusiasm. If we lose our enthusiasm, everything will become slack. In old age, I came out from Vrindavana. I had no money, nothing, but I thought, let me try. So here it is being discussed on the situation where Prabhupada has to discuss with the GBC members and make resolutions on the problem with the on the various houses of the divisions of the people. He had given the instructions to the GBC members to deal this kind of problems in the letters and his books, and now everyone, they have to apply those instructions according to the specific time and the place. So on the day of the GBC meeting, they had a meeting all over the day, and even they had a list of resolutions like discussing the divisions of ashrama in ISKCON, which said husbandless and women with children should not be allowed to live in ISKCON temples, and husband and wife should also should not live in the ISKCON temples, and not even if separately. And before entering marriage, devotees should have a means of supporting themselves, and they should not expect help from ISKCON. And also, after getting married, the householder should be financially responsible for his wife until he takes sannyasa. So after reading the resolutions, Prabhupada usually mentioned very little verbal response, but because his practice was usually just to nod his head in the approval, or occasionally he will comment. But after hearing all this resolution, and then that husbandless wife with the woman should not stay in the temples, he uttered a thoughtful and then he mentioned that his only concern is that the people should not waste their valuable human life, and he was in a personal and humble way, he mentioned that as a pure devotee, after so much struggle, people got this human form, and they should not waste this opportunity. And he also mentioned that he cannot discriminate men, woman, or child, or rich or poor. So everyone can come, and then they can take the Krishna consciousness, so that they will not waste their human life. And so after hearing this, the GBC members had plenty to say, but seeing the remarks from Prabhupada, they all remained silent. And finally, Tamala Krishna Goswami, who was the GBC chairman for the year, he mentioned that he mentioned, he said to Prabhupada that they will strike that resolution. And also Prabhupada disapproved one resolution that said the householder should give the financial support for his wife for the rest of his life until he took sannyasa. He rejected that resolution. And he also mentioned that everyone should be the guru, and he had 5,000 disciples or 10,000, and everyone should have 10,000 each. So in this way, the branches, they should create various branches of the Chaitanya tree, and they become spiritually strong, and they should chant their rounds and follow their 4 rules. And this is not an artificial show or a material thing. So everyone should chant and follow the 4 rules and pray to the Krishna in helplessness, and they should have the enthusiasm to do this. And in case if they lose this enthusiasm, then everything will be slack. And he also mentioned that he came out of Vrindavan at an older age and without any money, but he thought that he can he will try.
Okay, Srikar.
Bhagwan spoke out spontaneously. You're still enthusiastic, Srila Prabhupada? Yes, Prabhupada smiled. I'm enthusiastic. I don't think I'm an old man. Sometimes we think we are old, said Bhagwan. No one is old, said Prabhupada. Na hanyate hanyamane sarire. Sometimes in old age, one is pushed down, but I am enthusiastic. The soul is not destroyed with the destruction of the body. Bhagavad Gita 2.20. Prabhupada said he was pleased at most of the resolutions because they indicated that a strong GBC was now ready to relieve him so he could concentrate on his translation work. He said that the devotees would have to strictly follow for the entire year what the GBC has agreed on. There should be no changes unless he approved. And at the next annual meeting, they could make any changes necessary. The GBC chairman then called for a vote on an unresolved topic from the day's meeting. The topic had been discussed, but since it had not been approved, the chairman called for a vote. Everyone voted yes by raising their right hand. Then Srila Prabhupada raised his hand also. His disciples immediately laughed at this endearing gesture. Yes, Prabhupada said, I'm simply following the GBC. Whatever you say, I have to follow. When the temple presidents heard about the GBC resolutions, many objected. They knew Prabhupada had approved them, but they thought that the actual spirit and interpretation some of the sannyasis might give to the resolution would cause a split in the society. Many of the temple presidents, being grihasthas, felt discriminated against. They wanted a chance to present their side. Prabhupada knew of the president's discontent, and he brought up the subject on his next morning walk. Surrounded by sannyasis, GBC men, temple president, and others, he brought out the issue, attempting to bring his spiritual family into harmony. I have heard, he said, that too much stricture on the grihastha may cause some disturbance. Yes, admitted Madhurisa. So, said Prabhupada, I think the grihasthas themselves should form a small committee and define what they will do, instead of forcing something on them. Because in this age, nobody can follow strictly all the strictures in the Shastras. Tamal Krishna objected to the idea of grihasthas revising the GBC resolution. In none of our resolutions, he argued, do we say anything about how the grihasthas should live. The resolutions simply say how our society should be run. It does not say how grihasthas should live. And on point of objection, Prabhupada has already corrected us. So, Bhagwan, he says to Srila Prabhupada that Srila Prabhupada, even in his old age, is still very enthusiastic. Srila Prabhupada replies, yes. He says that he's enthusiastic and he does not think that he's an old man. And then Srila Prabhupada says that no one is old. Like the soul is not destroyed with the destruction of the body. But Srila Prabhupada says sometimes because people think that because of old age one is pushed down, but he says he's still very enthusiastic. And Prabhupada said he was very pleased with most of the resolutions, most of the decisions that GBC took that day. And because that showed that a stronger GBC was now ready to relieve Srila Prabhupada so that from the managerial role so that he can concentrate on his translation work. And he said that all the devotees must strictly follow for the entire year what GBC had agreed on. There should not be any changes unless he approved it. And at the next annual meeting, if there is any concern, they can make any changes then. And then, so the GBC chairman then called for a vote on unresolved topics from the day's meetings. And then all the topics were discussed, but on some of the topics, there was no approval. Therefore, chairman called for a vote. And then all the devotees, many devotees, they raised their hands, voting yes, and Srila Prabhupada also raised their hand. And devotees, his disciples laughed when they saw Srila Prabhupada raise his hand. Srila Prabhupada said, yes, I'm simply following GBC. Whatever they say, he said he would follow. And then when the temple presidents heard about the resolutions that the GBC passed, Many objected. They knew that Srila Prabhupada already approved it, but still they thought that the actual spirit uh, and the interpretation that some sannyasis might give may cause some split in the society. So many of the temple presidents were grihasthas, and then they felt discriminated, and then they wanted a chance to present their side as well. Srila Prabhupada understood the president's discomfort, and then he brought up this again same subject matter in his morning walk the next day. He was surrounded by sannyasis, the GBC man, temple president, and others. And then he brought this issue in an attempt to bring harmony within his spiritual family. And then Srila Prabhupada says, "Oh yeah, he heard that there is too much uh, stricture on the grihasthas, and then it's causing some disturbance." And Madhu Dvisa, he says yes. And then Prabhupada says then maybe grihasthas should form a small committee themselves and they decide what they want to do instead of GBC forcing things on them. Because in this age, like nobody can strictly follow all the strictures in the Shastra. That's what Prabhupada says. Again, Krishna Maharaj, he again objected to the idea of grihasthas forming their own small committee and passing a resolution. He says that in none of the resolutions that GBC passed, they did not mention anything about how the grihastha should live. And then the resolutions only say that how the society should be run. So wherever there were some objections, then Srila Prabhupada clarified already in the resolution.
I think it may be further decided, Prabhupada continued. Make a small committee of 3 or 4 grihasthas. Then you define how you live. Changing the subject, Prabhupada asked when the pandal was going to be built. Today, 350 devotees were expected to arrive from the west. The pandal stage was supposed to have been erected and festivities, including theatre, would begin in the evening. But the devotees, irrepressibly absorbed in the grihastha sannyasi issue, could not refrain from pursuing it further. That is the distinction between the enjoying spirit and the renouncing spirit, asked Pushta Krishna Swami, returning to the theme. Prabhupada asked. Although the question was pointed, he remained poised and detached from their party divisions. His idea of what to do was definite, but his method of teaching it was careful and gradual. He already knew well the difficult task of satisfying divergent views among his strong-minded disciples. For years, he had been making the ultimate decisions and teaching his disciples how to go forward in a united way. Once again, an issue was building that only he could solve, if they would listen. Pushta Krishna. For example, as we have been discussing, there are different tendencies between the brahmacharis and the grihasthas. The attitude of the brahmacharis is toward renunciation. If a brahmachari gives up his brahmachari life to become a grihastha, that means he is more inclined to the enjoying spirit, at least to some extent. So, how to deal with this situation? Prabhupada, if you want to enjoy, who can stop you? Tamala Krishna, but we cannot support it. We cannot support his enjoyment that he should take on himself. So Prabhupada continues to Prabhupada says that they can make a small committee of 3 or 4 grihasthas and they can define how they can live. So Prabhupada changes the subject and asks when the pandal was going to be built, because there were 350 devotees expecting to arrive from the west. So the devotees says that the stage was supposed to be to have been erected, and even the theater would begin in the evening. But the devotees are involved in Grihastha Sannyasi issue, and they're not concentrating on this Pandal festival. So, Pushta Krishna Swami was asking whether this is the distinction between enjoying spirit and renouncing spirit. Prabhu, can you please summarize? It's a little bit confusing. So
I know. This is a conversation, no? This is not
yes, yes,
this
Prabhu.
only. He brought it. The distinction between enjoying spirit and renunciation. So Prabhupada kept quiet, remained poised, because he didn't want it to part. See, here is the thing. As it says that many temple presidents are grahasthas. Well, they are making resolutions, so men grahasthas cannot live and together and all these things they're making. So that's and all the GBC men were sannyasis and GBC devoted sannyasis. So that's whole thing are going on. So his idea of what to do was definite, but his method of teaching was careful and gradual. He already knew well the difficult task of satisfying divergent views among the strong-minded people. For years, he had been making the ultimate decisions. Now he's allowing his devotees to come to a conclusion unitedly, keeping Krishna at the center. So once again, an issue was building that only he could solve. So this is the situation. Prabhupada wants GBC to solve, but now everybody is depending on Prabhupada final to resolve this. What they came out, they are not satisfied. So Pushta Krishna, for example, as we've been discussing, there are different tendencies between brahmacharis and grihasthas. And the attitude of brahmacharis towards renunciation, they don't want to enter grihastha life, Maya and everything, right? Krishna. And the attitude of brahmachari give up, if a brahmachari gives up his brahmachari life to become a grihastha, that means he is more inclined to the enjoying spirit, at least up some extent. So how to deal with this situation?
Excuse me, Prabhu.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
May I interject for a moment, please? Just another facet of perspective on this that I think I know that Srila Prabhupada knows about as a grihastha for so many years with so many children, and being devout and very spiritual, and our founder Acharya. So brahmacharis choosing to leave the brahmachari ashram to become grihasthas, Srila Prabhupada was so compassionate because yes, there is enjoyment, which will happen anyway. And he's like, if the false renunciation happens, then it turns into something else later. But we're talking about devotees. So this enjoyment is not just enjoyment, it's actually dharmic. Because when devotees get together and start families and more devotees come, this is also seva. You're not, it's bringing about an increase of the community. So when children come, they're devotees, they're Vaishnavas, they're born to Vaishnava families. So it changes the dynamic. It's enjoyment, of course, yeah, but it's enjoyment with purpose. And when things are done nicely, the husband takes care of everything, the family stays together. And even when not, these devotee children, they come to a platform where they carry the torch.
No, that's a very good point. Actually, what is happening is Prabhupada said this only for that particular time period. He said that. He said that GBC next year, you follow this only for 1 year. If GBC comes together, that's favorable for the movement, because as you mentioned, children are very important aspect of growing the devotees. If everyone becomes brahmachari, then our movement will not grow. So actually, it's that particular situation where the grihasthas are not stable in their life, so these things are being discussed. Prabhupada is not against about, primarily it's oriented to the Western world. See, most of the disciples were Western that time, not even Indian disciples, are hardly, very rarely they were. So he had a bigger concern. So he said, okay, you all make a decision. He's not making a point. So thank you. Yeah. ISKCON encourages grihasthas to have the family life. It's nowhere it is saying that only just brahmachari life. Thank you. So according to Prabhupada said, according to different positions and attitudes, the 4 ashramas are there. Did we read? I don't know if you read it or not. Anyway, Saikan Prabhu, please read from here.
Hare Krishna. Prabhupada, according to different positions and attitudes, the 4 ashramas are there. Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, Sannyasa. This means that everyone is not on the equal platform. There are different platforms, but the whole idea is how to give up the propensity of enjoyment that is wanted. Pushta Krishna. We find in the Srimad Bhagavatam that Sukadev Goswami would approach the householders in the morning just so long as to give them a little bit of spiritual knowledge, and he would accept the offering of some milk. So the sannyasis and renunciants, generally they wouldn't very much relish the association of householders because of this enjoying spirit and the association that it entails. So we are finding also within our society that those who are inclined to remaining celibate, they are finding the association of persons even within our movement who have this enjoying spirit to be somewhat detrimental to their own spiritual life. Prabhupada, then what is your proposal? You should drive them away? Madhudvisa, unless there is association, then they will never become purified. Tamal Krishna, no, that is not the problem, because everyone comes together for association. They come together in the temple for kirtan, for lectures, for prasadam. These things are common activities. There is no question that we should not have common activities between all the ashrams. But our living there must be, but for living there must be separate arrangement. Prabhupada, now even in the temple you are complaining that a husband and wife are talking. Prabhupada seemed almost coy in the way he gradually led and manipulated the issue. He was also hearing more clearly the minds and hearts of his divided disciples. Tamal Krishna, yes, they are not talking Srimad Bhagavatam. That Prabhupada, that you will find everywhere. Bhagavata. There is a complaint that sometimes is made that there is too much aversion on the part of the brahmacharis. But isn't that a quality of a brahmachari, that he should have a healthy contempt for sense gratification? I do not follow. Prabhupada, I do not follow. The devotees crowded around as closely as possible. This was an important point. So here the discussion is continuing. Pushta Krishna Swami is giving an example from Srimad Bhagavatam that Sukadev Goswami would only interact with the spiritual, with the grihasthas, only very little, like to give them some spiritual knowledge and just offer some, accept some offerings, and they don't relish the association of the householders. And even he says that even some brahmacharis who want to be celibate, they are like having the association of the grihasthas is a little bit detrimental to their own spiritual life. Then Prabhupada says, what should we do? Should we drive them away? Madhudisa says, if there's no association, then they'll never become purified. And Tamal Krishna Swami says, no, there should be association, but that association should be for like kirtan, lectures, prasadam. The question is, should they live there? So I think he's making a case that they should not live. For living, there should be a separate arrangements for the brahmacharis and sannyasis. And Prabhupada says, even in temple now we are complaining that husband and wife are talking. So Prabhupada is slowly, like he's quiet, but he's gradually leading and manipulating the issue. And he says that, and Tamal Krishna Swami says they're not talking about Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhupada says that will be everywhere. And also Bhagavata Prabhu says that there is a lot of dislike for the brahmacharis, because the quality of a brahmachari is he should have a dislike for sense gratification. And Prabhupada says it does not follow. And then they were all discussing this important point, and they were I think waiting for Prabhupada's response.
Hope everybody is getting the discussion is that people from different conscious level are coming together. Right? Yes, brahmacharya is coming and sanya. That's a different big change for them, brahmacharya life itself. So now they're associating with brahmacharya grahasthas. Well, they will be deviated, you know. So devotees of different consciousness come together. How to deal with? Rupa Goswami actually gives a little solution to in this kind of situation, but they're practically talking about how to solve this kind of association. A brahmacharya will be inspired to take grahastha life. Right? They will be, but this is the practical thing they're discussing. Prasanthi?
The devotees crowded around and as closely as possible. This was an important point. Pushed Krishna. He is saying that sometimes the brahmacharis and even the sannyasis may have a strong aversion to association with women and householder life. But sometimes the grihasthas will criticize the sannyasis and brahmacharis and say, this is fanaticism. The grihasthas say that this is just as bad as enjoying spirit because a sannyasi is meditating on the same thing except that he is averse to it. So, Bhagavata Dasa question is it better to be neutral or to be averse? Prabhupada, these are all fanaticism. Real unity is in advancing Krishna consciousness. Kalau naste eva naste eva. In the Kali Yuga, you cannot strictly follow, neither I can strictly follow. If I criticize you, if you criticize me, then we go far away from our real life of Krishna consciousness. Mr. Krishna. So, it is correct to say that if we are not Krishna conscious, then if it's not the Grihastha problem, it would be some other problem. Prabhupada, yes, we should always remember that either Grihastha or Brahmachari or Sannyasi, nobody can strictly follow all the rules and regulations. In Kali Yuga, it is not possible. If I simply find fault with you and if you find fault with me, then it will be factional and our real business will be hampered. Therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had recommended that Harinama, chanting Hare Krishna mantra, should be very rigidly performed, which is common for everyone. Grihastha, Vanaprastha and Sannyasa. They should always chant Hare Krishna mantra, then everything will be adjusted. Otherwise, it is impossible to advance. We shall be complicated with the details only. This is called Niyama Graha. I think I have explained it. I think it is a little bit down, Prabhuji. So Bhagavata was saying there's a complaint that sometimes there's too much aversion on part of brahmacharis, but isn't that the quality of brahmachari that he should have a healthy contempt of sense gratification? So again, Prabhupada asked for further explanation. Then Pushta Krishna says that sometimes he's saying that sometimes the brahmacharis and even the sannyasis have some aversion towards the grihastha life or the activities in grihastha. And grihasthas will criticize sannyasis and brahmacharis. So this is fanatism. And he asks, is it better to be neutral or to be averse? Then Prabhupada says that they are picking up small details and these are all fanatism. And the real purpose in this Kali Yuga is to advance in Krishna consciousness and to cooperate with each other and move forward. If they start criticizing each other, then the real goal will be hampered. And they should always remember that no matter in which ashramam they are in, they have to follow the rules and regulations and should chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra. And that will bring that cooperation and unity and everything gets adjusted. And that has to be rigidly performed. And otherwise it will be very impossible to advance and unnecessarily complicate things.
Thank you. Yes.
One thing I'd like to say that I saw here, if you don't mind, please.
Yeah.
Srila Prabhupada was mentioning, no, don't move it. Srila Prabhupada's mentioning that whether Grihasta, Brahmachari, Sannyas, nobody can strictly follow all the rules and regulations. In Kali Yuga, it is not possible. So we really are dependent on the mercy of Krishna, and mistakes due to imperfections in this field of energy called the body, under the vision of the knower of the field, which is our soul, we depend on Krishna and we keep moving.
Very good. Thank you. Yeah, that's right. That's why Prabhupada is observing this. Everybody is coming, they are saying, presenting as if like their ashram is better. And it was there some kind of feelings. See, it's a new Varnashrama system, Daivi Varnashrama systems Prabhupada is established. Everything is being newly established, re-established, re-spiritualization of the society. This is natural. We are very fortunate that we are reading this. And Prabhupada is founder actually for thousands of years. So yeah, thank you. I think things are improved now at this time. There's a proper respect for each ashramas, right? We don't see much any such kind of discriminations feelings. Everyone understand that ultimate purpose is to serve Krishna, irrespective of what ashram one is in. Thank you, Mother Mitravinda. So Pranath Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Madhudvisa, yes, in the Nectar of Instruction, Prabhupada, Niyamagraha is not good. Niyama means regulative principles, and Agraha means not to accept. Agraha means the opposite, too eager to accept the regulative principles, but no advancement spiritually. Both of them are called Niyamagraha. So the basic principle is that Niyamagraha is not recommended. If we advance in Krishna consciousness by the simple method of chanting 24 hours, Kirtaniya Sadahari, then things will be automatically adjusted. You cannot find in Kali Yuga that everything is being done very correctly to the point. That is very difficult. Just like our poet Allen Ginsberg, he was always accusing me, Swamiji, you are very conservative and strict. Actually, I told him, I'm never strict, neither I am conservative. If I become conservative, then I cannot live here for a moment. So I'm not at all conservative. I was living with one boy, Carl Jurgens. I was cooking and I saw in the refrigerator some pieces of meat for his cat. So still, I kept my food in that refrigerator. What can be done? They had been talking for over an hour, and Prabhupada had given definitive instructions, but it was not over yet. It was clear, however, who was in control. Later that morning, 350 devotees approached the precincts of Mayapur in a caravan of buses from the Calcutta airport. For most of the arriving devotees, this would be their first visit to Mayapur, and their excitement countered the fatigue of the long journey from the West. Free of worldly concerns, they had come to India to visit Sridham Mayapur and to see Srila Prabhupada again. So Madhudvisha, acknowledged that yes, that Prabhupada explained about Niyamagraha in the Nectar of Instruction, and then Prabhupada continues, you know, um, that Niyamagraha is not recommended, and that Niyama, he defines what Niyama is, regulative principles, and Agraha is the opposite, not to accept. And it's not good to accept, very eagerly accept the regulative principles, but not advance spiritually. And everything will be adjusted automatically if we just simply chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, Kirtanya Sadahari 24 hours. And it is very difficult in Kali Yuga for everything to be done, uh, perfectly to the point. And Prabhupada gives the example of Allen Ginsberg, when he accused Prabhupada of being very conservative and strict. And Prabhupada goes on to explain that he was not conservative at all, and if he were, he wouldn't be, living in the country for even a moment. And then he gives the episode of where he was living with Carl Jurgens, who had some meat in his refrigerator, and Prabhupada still you know stored his food in the same refrigerator. And Prabhupada gave definitive instructions, um, but it was not over yet. And then later that morning, you know, um, in a caravan of buses from the Calcutta airport, 350 devotees came, and for most of those devotees, it was their first time visit to Mayapur, and you know, they were very excited, although very tired after the long journey. Um, they came to visit, India, to visit Srila Mayapur and to also Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you. Nipa, we will end with Nipa.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
After 3 hours on the road, the buses had entered Mayapur, and soon the devotees were seeing the Gaudiya Math temples, the Srivasa Angna, uh, the Samadhi of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, and the birth site of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all appearing one after the other, as the buses' horns blaring almost insensibly veered around the winding turns of Bhakti Siddhanta Road. Villagers on foot and in rickshaws, buffalo, goats, and cows moved hurriedly aside. Local residents looked up with curiosity and surprise at the sight of hundreds of Western bhaktas arriving to celebrate Gaura Purnima. Then the arriving devotees saw on the flat Mayapur landscape the pinkish hue and beautiful features of ISKCON's Mayapur Chandrodaya Mandir, the place of Srila Prabhupada had prepared for them, the home of which they had heard so much. As the buses arrived at the gate to the ISKCON property, the devotees cheered to see the new domes and fields of flowers, and their eagerness to see Srila Prabhupada increased. There would be formalities of registering and receiving a room, a few complications on locating and settling in, but nothing major. They were home now among fellow devotees. Soon they would be able to bathe in the Ganges and to hear the schedule for parikramas to the holy places. Some devotees rested while others met with friends from various places in the world. They shared the latest news and received experienced advice about Ganges' swift current and about avoiding dysentery and mosquitoes. By early evening, they had all moved into their rooms and taken prasadam. The Ch.49 musicians in a small room about the entrance gate began playing an evening raga. The sky darkened and devotees began gathering in the brightly lit temple room from the gigantic kirtana. These devotees had been working very hard in various cities throughout the world, and coming to Mayapur was like reward for their austerities and patient service. Now they could relax and enjoy spiritual life with no responsibilities other than to worship the deities, to see and hear Srila Prabhupada, to chant Hare Krishna, and to simply be Krishna conscious in the eternal abode of Lord Chaitanya. So after the 3 hours on the road, the buses were at the Mayapur, and the devotees were excited to see the Gaudiya Math temples, and there was like the birth site of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all appearing one after another, and there were horns, and there were horns blaring, and there was winds and turning of Bhakti Siddhanta road, and villagers were on foot, and there were rickshaws and goats, and local residents were very curious and surprised to see hundreds of Western bhaktas to celebrate Gaura Purnima. And then there were devotees saw on the flat Mayapur landscape, there was a pinkish hue, beautiful features of ISKCON's Mayapur Chandrodaya Mandir, the place Srila Prabhupada had prepared. And as the buses arrived at the gate to the ISKCON property, there was like cheers and flowers, and their eagerness to see Srila Prabhupada was increasing. And they were home among the fellow devotees, and they took their bath at the Ganges, and they scheduled for parikramas. And some devotees were resting while others went to meet their friends, and they shared the latest news and their experiences about the Ganges, and they were also precautioned about the dysentery and mosquitoes. And early evening, they all moved into their rooms and they took the prasadam also. There were Shehnai and small as musicians in a small room above the entrance gate, and they played the raga, evening raga. And then, when it was evening, when the sky was darkened, the devotees gathered in the brightly lit temple for gigantic kirtana. and devotees who were working in various cities throughout had come from the world, and they coming to Mayapur was like a reward for their austerities and patience. And they were relaxing and enjoying with no responsibilities other than to worship and to hear Srila Prabhupada and to chant and simply be Krishna consciousness was like an eternal abode of Lord Chaitanya.
Very well. Isn't it sound so wonderful, pleasing? These devotees work so hard and they go for pilgrimage, they spend wonderful time. Anyway, it's 8:44. I'm very, very grateful to all of you. Thank you, Mother Mitravinda, for joining. Hope you can join whenever regularly. Very nice. Thank you. Hare Krishna, everyone. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
AJ, thank you so much. You wanna join